Welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar on winning in an API-driven world, ensuring quality and availability with AlertSite and Akana. Before we jump into the webinar, let me do a quick sound check. It would be great if you could just tell me in the GoToWebinar chat panel or the questions panel that you can hear me okay, or you can raise your hand as well. Okay, thank you so much for the confirmation. Let's start with the webinar. Before starting the actual content, quickly let's go through the housekeeping items. Throughout the webinar, you can ask questions, you can type them in the GoToWebinar questions panel anytime. Laura, my guest presenter, and I will be keeping this webinar very conversational. So we will be taking questions as they go if the questions are relevant to what we are talking about at that point, or else we have saved some time at the end of the webinar to take care of all the questions. You can tweet us at SmartBear, AlertSite, or Akana Inc. During the webinar or after the webinar. Tell us how you like the webinar, or you can engage in conversation with us using the hashtags mentioned on the screen. We are recording this webinar, so all attendees will get a recorded version of this webinar as well as the slide deck after the webinar. And we have a very short survey for you to fill at the end of the webinar, just a few questions to let us know how you liked it, how we can improve, and some questions about your understanding of the API world. So welcome again. Good morning, good afternoon, based on the part of the world you are in. Winning in an API-driven world, ensuring quality and visibility. The webinar is brought to you by Akana and AlertSite. I am Priyanka Tiwari. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for AlertSite. I talk and read a lot about web, mobile application performance, as well as the importance of APIs in the modern applications. And I have with me today my guest speaker, Laura Heritage, who is the Director of API Strategy in Akana. Laura, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, just as Priyanka said, I am Laura Heritage, Director of API Strategy at Akana. I work a lot with customers around the world on developing their internal partner and external API strategies.
Perfect. And Laura has been in the industry for quite some time, and she speaks at all the major API conferences. She's a very well-known name in the industry, and we're very glad to have Laura on the call today. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks.
So let's go over the agenda of what we will be covering. Of course, we did the introductions. We'll be talking about the enormity and opportunity of the API economy. What it means to you, even if you are not dealing with APIs right now and thinking about working with APIs in future, or you're already providing APIs as part of your business or your internal innovation movement. Then we'll talk about different stages of API lifecycle, and then the challenges associated with all of those stages and where you fit in that API lifecycle. If you're already working with APIs, you know that all the stages of the lifecycle are not mutually exclusive, and you might feel that a lot of the challenges of multiple stages of the lifecycle resonate with you. So we'll talk about all of those. Then we will take deeper dive into the challenges with API management. Laura will take care of that part, and I will talk about the challenges with API monitoring. We will end this webinar with a short demo of AlertSite Akana and AlertSite Akana integration and how you can get the 360-degree view of your API performance with our products. And at the end, we have saved some time for question and answer, so feel free to ask all your questions. First things first, APIs are taking over the world. So if you have heard about Internet of Things, big data, digital transformation, all of these industry technology trends and buzzwords have APIs as their important underlying construct. Small companies, large companies, various internal departments are using APIs, are increasingly planning to use APIs in the future. And then there are some companies who are using APIs as their business models. And this is flat true across all the different industries, all the different functions, and we're increasingly seeing some interesting industries, some traditional industries using APIs to innovate. Then when we are talking about APIs and we are talking about the new trends in the technology, this is what we came across a few weeks ago. So Gartner publishes this report of technology trends of every year. They generally publish this report somewhere in October or month of November. And this year's technology report looking at 2016 was particularly interesting. So you can see that the important part of the report on the screen here, there are three main themes in the technology trends of 2016. The digital mesh, where the users will use applications across different devices and expect seamless performance across all of those devices. Then the smart machines, where you talk about Internet of Things and then autonomous cars and all of those cool things. And then the third important trend was the new IT reality, where you talk about artificial intelligence and advanced system architecture, etc. APIs are responsible for all of these movements, and APIs make a very important part of all of those digital technology trends. So before jumping on to seeing how companies are using APIs internally as well as externally, I touched on the point of mentioning how different industries are using APIs. So when we talk about technology trends, we don't want to sound like we just are talking about technology industry or talking about financial technology industry or certain industries that are stereotyped to be ahead of the technology curve than some other industries. So when we were preparing for this webinar, I was talking to Laura and asking her if she has seen any interesting examples of the usage of APIs, because she's been in the industry for such a long time. And Laura came up with a very good example. Laura, would you mind sharing that example with our audience?
Sure. We work with a very large farm equipment manufacturer, and this is an industry people don't think as very techy. But in actuality, farming is an extremely technical field. They had IoT before we even called it IoT. Their machinery is decked out with all sorts of sensors that will test the soil and do depth, a pH and just the soil, all sorts of measurements around soil quality. And they will feed that up into the cloud, which the data is then combined with real-time data and historical data to tell the farmers exactly how to treat that specific small square footage of land in order to increase their yield. So this farm equipment manufacturer is not just about producing the farm equipment. It's really about producing an ecosystem around their farm equipment, exposing the data and enabling the farm equipment to be controlled and worked with via APIs. Right? This is why APIs are so important. It's really about building out an ecosystem around your company. Okay. So one of the things with farm equipment is, because it is such a technical space, the ecosystem that the farm manufacturers built out really helps create a stickiness and helps keep those farmers with their specific machinery. Because once you pick a particular farm machinery brand, you tend to stay with it. Even though they say the machinery is easily flopped in and out, interchangeable, it really helps the farmer if everything is all one giant platform, so that they can get all their services from one vendor. So this is where it's important, and we need to think about these APIs not as a technical thing, but really as a business platform thing, allowing your company to grow your business, grow your network at scale, and create stickiness with your customers and your business partners and your suppliers and so forth. So there's my example. I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, that's a good example, especially because agriculture industry, I mean, when you start thinking about APIs, probably agriculture industry is the last industry you can think about. The other good example, I was just talking to one of my sales engineers here in AlertSite, and we have a customer who uses API monitoring extensively, and they do insurance. They've been using APIs for a few years now. They don't have any public APIs. All their APIs are strictly for internal purposes. So insurance is very standard-driven and very structured kind of industry. And they have been innovative enough to have a separate API evangelist team within the company and using APIs, innovating in that space, talking a lot at conferences about APIs, without giving any of their APIs to public. That makes me wonder how many APIs are there in the world. So I was on Programmable Web today on their API directory, and I saw that there were 14,723 public APIs. But that's just like tip of the iceberg, right?
Yeah, most of the companies that we work with, you know, the huge mountain of their APIs are internal. The next big, large basket of APIs are going out to their partners and for their mobile initiatives. And then finally, some have a more handful of the open web APIs. Now, it's important, and I want to kind of distinguish what we mean between APIs and services, because I think there's a lot of people on the call, and I get this all the time when I go out to customers. Well, what's the difference between SOA services? Right? Why are this API is the same as SOA services? And yes, to an extent it is, but SOA services were really built for application-to-application communication internally, right? Helping your internal enterprise innovate and move faster. The one thing SOA service didn't focus on was the consumption. So to expose some of your existing services as assets to be consumed, they really need to be packaged up as APIs and thought of as how is the consumer going to use this, why would the consumer want to use this, and how can we easily onboard, right? Because you want to establish yourself as a platform network at scale, you know, get your partners onboarding, communicate with those that are consuming with your APIs. So when you think about APIs, you really got to think about your services assets being consumed by other people. How do you package them up to make them that easy? And then being able to monitor, because these APIs become just like your websites, just like your web applications, and even more important because they're feeding hundreds of different channels. So.
Exactly.
Sorry.
That's my takeaway from what you said. APIs are just like your website. They're like, the modern version of your website. You should be worrying about them. You should be monitoring them. You should be making sure that the end user performance is right. And the slide we have up here on the screen is just taken from the Forrester Research report about establishing the API strategy. The slide is from 2013, but then right, I think it does a great job of laying out the different usages of using APIs. So you can see that there are, of course, the internal APIs that Laura was talking about. They just serve the internal enterprise application. And then there are some APIs that you share with your partners, the B2B kind of APIs, to share data and services between your applications and partner applications. There are some open web APIs that you give publicly, and they are generally listed on the API directories like Programmable Web. And then there are some companies who use APIs as their products. So APIs are part of their business model. They make their APIs available pay as you use base, or there could be some innovative pricing models there. But these are the main 4 areas, the blue boxes on the screen. These are the main 4 areas where people generally who deal with APIs see their APIs lying. And when we are talking about APIs, we cannot ignore about how huge the opportunity is. So on the screen, you can see these examples, Expedia and Salesforce and Fitbit. These are just very, very few examples. You can find zillions of examples like this on the web of companies telling how many percentage of their total revenue comes from their API business, or they opened up their APIs to developers and partners and marketing agencies, and that brought them new customers or saved them so many dollars in in-house innovation or in-house R&D. The possibilities with APIs, there's just simply no limit to what you can do with the APIs. But then what should you be doing with APIs? That is definitely definable. And there's something called as API Billionaires Club. I don't know who coined this term, but I think this is a very apt term. The logos that you see on the screen, these APIs are very famous APIs. So if you have been using APIs for a while, you immediately recognize these names. And majority of these people get more than billions of calls made to their APIs per day. There are some examples here that the eBay transactions, 7 billion in eBay transactions processed in 2013 were through APIs. And I'm pretty sure that number has increased a lot by now. And APIs definitely bring you revenue. They also reveal some features of your products which you had never thought of. And then Google API is the perfect example of that. So Google Maps API was started as just another offering by Google to help people navigate better. But then the different use cases that we see with the Google Maps API, the location finder, the placement, and the Google Maps API you find on Yelp, and then the Maps API you find on Zillow. These are the different use cases of Google Maps API were only possible when Google made it available to their developers and publicly. Would you like to add anything here, Laura?
No, I think that the key thread amongst all of these things is that APIs allow you to build an ecosystem, a platform that allow other people to build businesses on top of yours. And once you do that, once you establish yourself as a platform where you can onboard your partners at scale, that's when you really reach the success of your API strategy. That's when you've become a true digital business. Right, and because of that, we'll see here, you have to really treat these APIs as first class, as real business assets within your organization, not just technical services of the yesteryear.
Exactly, and just from the point of reinventing the wheel in your own organization, if there's an API for that, why would you end up spending a lot of time and resources on developing that particular feature where you can simply adopt an external API and concentrate your efforts on building something which gives you competitive advantage? It's as simple as that. And that's why API lifecycle is very important. Making sure your APIs are functioning well is very important, and then the whole discussion around API monitoring and API management is very important. So before we go into discussing different challenges with API development lifecycle, let's take a step back and see what API can do to your business. So as Laura and I mentioned, that APIs bring you data, APIs bring you services, APIs give you place in the ecosystem, in the platform play. There are some researches that are done around API, and one particularly interesting research from Cisco that I really like, and Nordic API, a very famous API blog, wrote a lot about it, was how can API help you get new acquisition channels and new upselling and distribution channels. So they claimed that the customers that you get through an API-driven channel, through the channel created using APIs, has 26% more customer lifetime value than any other channels. And this brings us back to Laura's example of agricultural technology having use cases which are very sticky. So The customers that come through the API-driven channel, the customer lock-in is higher than the customers that come from any other channels. They see the value at an incremental level, and they stay with your business for longer terms than customers coming from any other channel. You can also use APIs to upsell your features. So a great example of this would be Medium, the online blogging platform. They opened up their APIs to a month back, I guess, not even 2 months back, a month back, and then they saw a splurge of API usage. People liked the text editor inside Medium more than the actual content on Medium, and there was no way for Medium to realize that or even make any revenue out of that. So they opened up an API, and now people can use the Medium text editor in any of other text editors of their choice and can post content on Medium directly or get content off Medium. And I thought that was wonderful. Now they can earn more revenue of something they thought was just a mere feature of their platform and was giving away for free. So that was very interesting. The other thing APIs help you with is affiliate marketing. You can turn the third-party developers into your affiliates by working with them and opening up your APIs, or you can become an affiliate yourself. So you must have seen how you can pin things on your Pinterest boards from all different web applications, or how you can use the PayPal's payment processing gateway across different websites or web applications. APIs make it possible, and increasing distribution, which we talked about in the previous slide. So these are just the very few ways how APIs help your business. But then again, as I said before, it's just imagination is the limit to how you can use APIs to grow, how you can use APIs to increase awareness of your product or your feature, and then just build new channel for revenue. Anything else, Laura, from your side before we jump on the API development lifecycle?
No, I just want to reiterate, APIs, there's many different monetization models for APIs, from free to pay, to a developer get paid, and all leads to, trying to, I was talking to some startups, and one of the things they said is they gave away their API for free because they found that if one of their customers using their service actually used their API in any integration, that increased their stickiness and converted them to a paid service, right? Consumer, or a new consumer. So APIs play many different functions. Again, these APIs are a real good business strategy. So that leads us into the API development lifecycle.
Yeah, that's a perfect lead into the API development lifecycle. So it starts with, as Laura mentioned before, consider APIs as your product, as your business, as your website. So it starts with defining and designing the API, talking about the API strategy, talking about what you want to achieve with this API, setting up some key performance indicators, defining the business model, and of course talking about the pricing. So Laura mentioned a couple of different pricing models for APIs. There could be free, there could be freemium, there could be pay as you go, or developer gets paid, or the consumer pays. So all kinds of different pricing models. You set these different pricing models at the define and the design stage. Then you talk.
So I think Oh, sorry. I just wanted to comment in there again. This is really what set APIs apart from what those traditional SOAP-based services are. You are creating a package designed for a consumer. It's a product, right? You have an actual strategy behind this API. You actually design it physically for the consumer that's going to be using it, right? You need to do market segment. Who is going to be consuming this API? And how do they want to consume it? If you are going to a traditional set of partners that only speak and work with SOAP, you probably don't want to force them to go rest right away, okay? But on the other hand, if you're going to any companies that are mobile, that are startups, that are more, do your market segmentation on who's going to consume this API and how do they want to consume it. What do they best? Do they best like JSON? Do they best like XML? So again, the thing that differentiates an API from a traditional service is that it's going to be consumed. It's designed for the consumer, and that's why the define and design phase are very, very important. And SmartBear, now has Swagger, which is an excellent design tool. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes, we do. SmartBear recently acquired Swagger, which lets you document and describe your APIs. So as Laura said, it is very important to understand your consumer in order to define and design, create APIs. And then the first step in understanding your consumer is, of course, knowing what kind of APIs they want, segmenting your market. And then the second important step there is making sure you document your API well, you describe your API well in order for the consumer to make it easy to consume. So the API is only as good as description, as they say, but then I wouldn't go a lot deeper into that. But then tools like Swagger will help you document your API in a very consumable way. Then the next step is test. I included the dev and test part in the design and test part here on the slide. The important part of the test stage is, of course, you have to do the functional testing of your API. Make sure that the API is returning right payload, returning right data at the right place for the consumer to make sense out of it. Then you should be worrying about the load testing. And load testing is always a challenge when it comes to APIs, because not all APIs are consumable. Not APIs are public facing. Some APIs are consumable internally. So how do you do load testing, and what parameters do you consider when you do load testing? And there are tools like Load UI and other load testing tools that come into picture here. And then you have to do security testing on your APIs to make sure that the APIs are secure. Then you deploy the APIs, and finally go to manage and monitor part of it. So on this slide, we are not spending much time on manage and monitor, because the rest of the webinar will be talking a lot about the API management and API monitoring. So I'll quickly go through the manage and monitor at this stage. At the manage stage, the challenge is making sure the API is controllable, visible, secure, and has high quality. And at the monitoring stage, you will be worrying about making sure that the API is available, is performing within your threshold limit, and is functionally correct every time you make an API call. So let's go ahead and see the challenges at different stages. So first start with the API management challenge. API management challenge. Laura, take it away.
All right. So you saw the life cycle on the previous page, and it gets quite complex. You need something to manage and control and help you work throughout that whole life cycle. Especially, I work with a lot of healthcare companies, banks, insurance companies. They really have a lot of regulation and compliances they have to meet, and so you need to have something that helps you manage the life cycles and ensures that you're meeting those compliances. They also need something to help you automate provisioning and promotion between all those different lifecycle states, going from, design test to actually going to your development, test, staging, and production environments. And then once you've got an API live and running, you need something to help with that lifecycle management to handle the API versioning. As we mentioned on the previous page, API security is utmost important nowadays. You don't want to make the CNN news on Christmas or Black Friday. So you need to understand how you can authenticate, authorize. If you need to do some single sign-on with your APIs, you need to be able to do that very well. If you have to have dual authentication, you need to be able to really make sure that your APIs are locked down. You also need to be able to, so besides the authentication and security, you got to think about message and parameter protection, threat protection such as denial of service, SQL injections, JavaScript injections, all of those different things that could attack and actually create a hole and go to your back-end data. You need to be able to protect against that. After that, if you are releasing your API out externally to partners or to those external application developers, you need to be able to do some quota management and rate limiting, be it if it's the number of calls or the amount of data that is streamed back and forth. You need to be able to do that. And you need to be able to do it really rapidly and easily, right? It needs to be able to be changed. You need to be able to put the licensing and productization around your APIs. And most importantly, for a lot of our banks and healthcare customers and retail customers is the whole notion of PCI, right? Is the platform that you have in place going to be able to be certified as PCI? Finally, once you get your security controlled, you might want to look at, okay, API integrations. What if the API I'm exposing doesn't match all my market segments? What if I need to make it a little slightly different from one market segment to the next? You should be able to change that very rapidly through configuration, not coding, right, through a little bit of orchestration. Or if you need to be able to combine two APIs to expose out to another market, or two services to expose out to another market. Again, you don't want to spend 3 to 6 months on a heavy ESB integration project. This should be very lightweight micro orchestrations done through configuration in order to expose that API. Finally, once you have that API, we get to that whole notion of networking at scale, being able to onboard your partners, work with your partners, communicate with your partners, your developers that are consuming your APIs very easily. So the developer should be able to easily find your APIs, communicate them with blogs, forums, things like that, and do that whole automated onboarding. Maybe there's a little approval process around it, or maybe they are auto-approved. Who knows? But you need to have a platform that allows you to do that. Finally, I'm going to get to the most important part that will segue into the rest of the presentation. It's the API analytics. Because these APIs are going to be more important than your website is today, because they are going to feed the experience across all of your channels, monitoring analytics is extremely important, okay? And we're talking about operational monitoring for how well the endpoint is running, how well the platform is running, to who's consuming the APIs, what apps, and how much they're consuming, and so forth, that you can use in monetization scenarios, to the business analytics. How can you collect and understand how your APIs are being used? Are you getting so many red shoes in Minnesota in the fall? Being able to really pinpoint those inflections in your business. They're going to come through the APIs. Now, there's the monitoring that we have, and there's several different ways to monitor. And the monitoring I'm talking about right here is all through the API, your API management platform. And Priyanka is going to talk to you about an even more important part of monitoring, about the user experience. But let's transition to monitoring now, so we can kind of set the stage and draw it out to you visually how monitoring really, how you really need to monitor your APIs.
Mm-hmm. That's a perfect setting the stage. Let's talk about API monitoring. And Laura talked about the importance of API monitoring and API analytics. How I like to describe it as, you should be looking at APIs from 3 different lenses of API monitoring: availability, performance, and functional correctness. Because not all APIs are corrected the same way. You have your external APIs, which are for new businesses or for adopting with the technology trends in the world. Or then you have your partner APIs, which are for integration and business development, working alongside your partners to come up with different revenue channels. Or there could be some internal APIs which are purely designed for line of business applications or internal applications. Because these APIs are created in a completely different way, monitoring them with the same strategy is not going to help you long term. I would like to mention this example of this company called Segment API. They raised $27 million in funding literally 2 weeks ago. They call their API as one API to rule them all, like Lord of the Rings reference. They have a single API which helps you do event tracking in order to send data to hundreds of different tools and databases. So just think about the different use cases this API might be going through. So if they have to monitor this particular API using just simple endpoint checking, that's not enough. You have to think about the end user experience. What if a person sitting in Tokyo, Japan is using this particular API from their iPhone 6? How is that going to help with their application? Or will that work the exactly same way if I am sitting in Boston and using the same mobile application which uses the segment API internally from my Samsung Galaxy? So all of these different moving parts of customer use cases should be taken into account when you're defining your API monitoring strategy. And that's why API monitoring becomes a critical part of dealing with APIs. Before we get into the challenges with API monitoring, just a quick case in point here. Let's say that you're using this API which sends a chunk of data from one place to other. Making sure that the endpoint is available is not enough, because you can see on the top left corner these two circles. One request is 50 KB, while the other request is 1 megabyte. The 50 KB request establishes a connection, that is the ping, which is almost instantaneous. But then the request completes in a different time depending on the size of the request. So the 50 KB one completes in next 100 milliseconds, while the 1 MB one takes another 500 milliseconds to complete. And this is literally ages in mobile application world. You can see the snippet from the infographic alert site posted a while back about cost of poor web and mobile application performance. You can see that people are increasingly less forgiving about bad application performance. If it's slow, the customer doesn't care about if it's the internal API or it's their own device or their own service provider or the wireless network that is causing the problem. For them, it's your app that is acting slow and they have to take some immediate action. And what could be the immediate action? They could go use the competitor's app, or they could simply abandon the process altogether, or they could go on to social media and write something nasty about it, or give a bad rating to your app. That slows down the app adoption, that slows down the API adoption. So you can see how critical APIs are to your overall applications adoption, and of course to your revenue and to your business. So who cares about the API performance? Why we should be worrying about the API performance? As an API provider, you care about API performance because a poorly performing API would slow down the adoption. And then that means less revenue, that means bad reviews, and that means more and more costs to fix those issues and support those issues. As an API consumer, you care about the performance because you are using APIs to save money of not doing that R&D in-house. But if that API doesn't work well for your application, that puts a bad light on your entire application. And then it reflects badly on your application's quality. And then it increases the burden and slows down your innovation. Even if you're not API provider, API consumer, general people like you and I definitely care about APIs because everything we use every day has APIs behind them. So your smartphones, your Fitbits on your hand, or your Apple Watches, or your smart TVs, everything uses APIs internally. And poor API means we can't use it. Imagine a day where you get up in the morning, you open your AccuWeather app, and then it shows you weather from a wrong location. I don't know how many of you will be able to resonate with that, but I live in Boston and we dread our winters here. So imagine if my AccuWeather is showing me weather from some different zip code because the internal API is acting something funny. That's disastrous for me. So everybody worries about API performance at a different level, at a different scale, but then everybody worries about the availability of the API so that the application uses the API in a right way and makes sure that it lets me do whatever I want to do. And then the API is performing well, so it's returning the data or the function in the time I wanted to return, and then it's functionally correct. So it's returning the right data at the right place. So let's see some API monitoring challenges. We talked a lot about why we need API monitoring and who cares about API monitoring. So let's quickly see what why do you need API monitoring, and then how do you choose the right tool for doing your API monitoring. So there are different stages where you can use API monitoring. Of course, the pre-production stage. So before even making your API available to your end consumer, that could be internal as well as public, you can use the API monitoring to benchmark your API against your other APIs, your competitors' API. And the pre-production monitoring will also help you design the right infrastructure. The pre-production as well as post-production monitoring, and as a consumer and as a provider to both of you, API monitoring will help you ensure end-user performance. So all these diverse use cases, different devices that customers use, different networks that they use, the different dynamic components of your application, API monitoring, timely API monitoring and advanced API monitoring will help you prepare for all of these different end-user scenarios. And if something goes wrong, the right API monitoring tool will help you correlate your API's performance with your entire application's performance and help you find the issue faster so that you can immediately do fault isolation, see where things are wrong with your API, with other parts of your application, or the other moving parts in your customer's use case, and then go ahead solving those. So API monitoring is important pre-production, post-production for API providers as well as API consumers. And this all is possible, like the right kind of API monitoring is possible only when you're asking right questions. So I talked about this multiple times, just checking the availability is not enough. So just checking if the endpoint is working is not enough. You should be checking if the endpoint is responsive, if the payload is unique to the request and it's not returning some gibberish, if the dynamic content is populating, if you can authenticate against the API, and if all of these different tests can be replicated at a random time in future, so preparing you for the challenges of the future application usage. And if all of these tests could be done from a neutral vantage point and from third party. So all of these questions, I try to give you just one slide which you can refer to make sure that you're monitoring APIs in a right way. Should be asking all of these questions at the right stage of your application performance monitoring to make sure that the APIs are not acting as a cause to your poor application performance. So we are almost coming to the end of the webinar, where we do the fun stuff, where we actually go into the products and do the demo. Just one simple thing before that. So we talked about the API management, we talked about API monitoring, we talked about how big and awesome APIs are and why everybody should be implementing if they're not implementing them already. Why you should listen to us. So this slide tells you that we kind of know what we are talking about. So here I have laid out a very stripped down, simple version of API lifecycle management stages, and then you can see that the products that are the boxes that are highlighted are we have products for that. The SmartBear products help you take care of those stages of the life cycle, and Akana, whom we are partnering with, the company Laura represents, is the part of deploy and managing of your APIs, which SmartBear doesn't do, but then we pair with companies like Akana to help you with that. So if you're using SmartBear tools, a ready API tool, which is a suite of tools which will help you do API testing, functional testing, load testing, API virtualization. Then this tool called Swagger, which helps you define and describe your APIs. And SOAP UI, our open source tool, which is the biggest and most popular API testing tool out there. More than 3 million people use it. And AlertSite, the tool I represent, which helps you do API monitoring. Along with Akana, which is best-in-class API management tool, we have you covered with everything that you have to worry about in terms of your APIs. Laura, do you want to quickly talk about Akana?
Sure. Akana provides the complete API management platform, everything you need from lifecycle management, right, giving you those DevOps capabilities and making sure you build the right services the right APIs the right way, meeting your regulatory compliances. Moving up the stack, we have the service integration, being able to simplify and speed up development, so you're not spending 3 to 6 months creating a coding and integration, but you're doing it through a configuration, not coding approach. Going up to the gateway services, we secure and protect your systems, provide the industry-leading security software in the industry. Going up to the developer engagement, we provide this is where you build out your developer and partner ecosystem, the thing that allows you to network at scale and onboard all of your partners and communicate with them and socialize your APIs, document them, being able to allow your partners and developers to test right there in line, and then all the way up through the analytics, being able to measure your impact, the impact of your API program, and to see your operational monitoring through everything that is going through the API gateway and API platform. If you go to the next slide. The next slide, these are just a list, some of the list of the capabilities when you're building out your digital business platform, your API platform, that you need to make sure that you have, from things from licensing to quota management, partner management, to PCI compliance, all the way through your developer portal, your gateway, your analytics, and the lifecycle management. And if you want more information on this, you can go to akana.com, and we have a wealth of information of how to go about establishing your API strategy and your API platform, your digital business platform. With that, I'm going to pass it off back to you, Priyanka, so that we can get closer to the demo.
Perfect. Let's go into the demo. I will be showing you guys quickly the AlertSite platform. AlertSite is a synthetic monitoring platform for your web, mobile, SaaS applications, as well as underlying APIs. We have close to 349 monitoring nodes, independent monitoring nodes, not part of the cloud, spread across the globe. You can see those tiny dots on the map. And then we also have on-premise nodes, so you can monitor your applications and your APIs behind the firewall. We help you do end-user performance monitoring, SLAs, benchmarking, as well as root cause analysis. This is just a quick list of why we should what we can do in terms of API monitoring in AlertSite. And these are all the points that I touched before that slide. So before jumping on to the demo, let me quickly open it. So this is how the AlertSite dashboard tool looks like. Okay. And you can see that I have multiple different monitors. Some of them are API monitors, some of them are application, like web applications or mobile application monitors. It's very simple to create a monitor using AlertSite. You just simply click on this plus button, then you can click on the monitors, and then you can see you can create API monitors. So I can simply enter endpoint URI or URL in here, and then create an endpoint monitor, or you can upload the SOAP UI or Ready API, which are other SmartBear tools for API testing. I can upload the script and create a monitor quickly. So the other way of doing it is, this is the Ready API platform, and I have a bunch of different tests created here, and you see the monitor API option. So you can just simply click on the monitor API option, enter your AlertSite, and log in, and you can monitor it from the Ready API or SOAP UI function as well. And then the integration works well in both open source products as well as paid version of the SOAP UI. Once you have the monitors ready, you can simply click on one of these monitors, and then you can, click on one of these monitors and see how this monitor is functioning from different locations. So you can see this particular currency converter API monitor has been running for a while, and you can see that the availability and performance report of this particular monitor. You can see that this has been running from Minnesota, and you can also click on this particular graph and then expand it and see what part of the API is contributing to that performance. I can edit this particular monitor. So this is where I talk about the user experience part of it, and I can set certain complicated advanced things on it to make sure that the user experience is up. So you can see that I can click on location and select different location. If I want to monitor my application from around the world, I can set different locations here and then save this monitor, and this monitor will be running from different locations. So now I can compare the API performance from different locations, or I can click on the alerts part, and then I can set availability as well as performance alerts on this particular API. So now I'm just not monitoring for the API's endpoint, but I'm also monitoring for API performance. I can set up static alerts, dynamic alerts, and all other intelligence of alert side alerting I can use in here. This is just scratching the surface of how alert side tool can help you. We do weekly detailed alert side demos every Wednesday at 11 o'clock in the morning EST. So if you want to learn more about alert side, please just write something in the chat box, and then we'll make sure that we arrange a custom demo for you. And now I'll pass the control to Laura, so she can show you the Akana interface as well as the Akana and alert side integration.
All right.
Laura,
okay, the question is, now I pushed, can you see my screen? What can you see on my screen?
I can see alert side on your screen.
Okay, perfect. All right, so you can see alert side is really powerful. I mean, I think the story that hits home for me is, you know, you have an API, and you can see the performance through your API management system, and it looks like it's running perfectly. But you have a customer in LA that says, you know what, they're experiencing poor performance. Something's wrong with your API. But customers in New York and London say nothing's wrong with it. So you really need that third level of monitoring that alert site brings, that outside monitoring outside of your API management platform, to help give you a complete picture of what's going on. Because remember, these APIs, I can't say it enough, they're more important than your website is, because they feed your website. So what I've done here is I've used the pet store API, because everybody knows the pet store API, and I created a couple of monitors. One monitor is for hitting the pet store API directly, and the second one is going through the API, Akana's API management platform. This is what Akana's API management platform looks like when you're logged in as administrator. You get to see a lot of different things. From a monitoring perspective, I can log in and I can see real time what's going on. I have some traffic that's flowing, a small amount of traffic hitting some of my pet store API, so that we have some throughput going here, and you can see it fluctuate when the latency, average latency and stuff changes. But we give you types, and you can change this, select which environment you want to see it on, what time interval. Maybe you want to do it, well, what does it look like, throughput look like in a minute, right? Not just a second. If I wanted to see the production, or I switched that, but I don't have a production, I can come down here and I can see, you know, usage by apps, and I can drill into these graphs by operation in my system, and I can export the data. I've got some other sorts of charts that allow me to do a little bit more filtering and drill down. I can adjust the time intervals, you know, down to the last few minutes. I can select different, I can focus on, okay, well, what's been the performance that the Box app API, Box app received for this API. So you can focus in, especially if you've got one customer that is complaining or receiving issues, you can focus in and drill in and see what's going on. Again, all this data can be exported and imported into your favorite analytics system, you know, if you got a BI system. We got log capability, so we can drill down and we can see, okay, It took 42 seconds for the service to actually call the backend API, backend service, and return the data. So in total, it took 43 milliseconds. We can drill in and see each leg of the request back and forth. Okay, so very powerful capabilities to drill in. We can do all sorts of searching, again, filtering by the app so you can isolate issues that you're receiving. If you're putting your APIs out as packages for monetization or just controlling consumption, you can view each app's quota usage, data usage, and you can see issues where this one exceeded their quota, and you get alerts and so forth. And if you want email alerts when you're getting close to your quota, and then when you pass your quota and things like that. So very powerful capabilities. But again, this gives us a look about what's going on from the API management platform. Now we want to take a look at our alert site capabilities. Those monitors that were defined in alert site can appear here in our API portal, so that the user, your API product manager, has one place that they have to go and look to see, oh, let's see if there's actual problems. So here's a monitor. The last response time track, this took 1.82 milliseconds. And this was from Munich, Germany, right? So Munich, Germany, the last response time was 1.8. Its last error was in October 7th, and so forth. And you can see that, well, if you were in California, you're getting really, down here, you're getting great response time compared to what they're getting in Munich, Germany. And you can then adjust, right? Maybe you put in a CDN, maybe you have another hosting of your service more in that location, and so forth. This graph here, I've selected that I want to just see my response times from California and Chicago, right? So I can see these graphs over time and see how the experience is from those different areas. So there's all sorts of things that you can do with these graphs, with the alert site data. And alert site provides APIs into their platform, right? So that integrations like this can happen and give you a great experience. And so that's why at Akana we like to partner with alert site to give you the complete experience of your APIs, from the detailed information around what's going on in your API platform and your backend endpoints, the monetization capabilities, all the way out to the user experience and monitoring and making sure those APIs stay up and running. So with that, I think we're ready to open for some questions, unless you have anything else you'd like.
No, that was perfect. That was a very apt, concise, but very clear demo. Let's quickly see if we have any questions. I'm scrolling through those, and one of the questions is about the slides. Yes, all the attendees will be getting the slides as well as the recording of the questions later on. One question was about the BI platform that we mentioned very quickly, and correlating the application performance and API performance. So AlertSite integrates with Splunk, and you can use AlertSite alerting data in your Splunk server and correlate that with your network database, as well as other application performance, and get actionable business insights from it. Do you like to chime in on the business intelligence part of it, Laura?
The business intelligence part of it is that, from the Akana API management platform capability, we capture tons of analytic information, and we provide an analytic view where you can create all sorts of unique graphs and easily, build business intelligence there. But we also have the ability via APIs and exports to take that information and put it into your own BI system. We understand a lot of the enterprises that we work with have, invested heavily and have great BI systems available, and the analytic information that we capture is great to put in there. And you can put you can inject many different types of tracking information if you want to via the API gateway in order to do some correlation if you need to via policy.
That's perfect, yeah. And then we have one question from Dennis. Can I view my related web and API monitoring in a single dashboard? Yes, you can. You can also group your monitors and view your web monitors or API monitors in those particular groups, and you can get alerts based on those particular groups. So people who are concerned for those web and API monitors will only be the people who are getting alerts if some availability or performance issues happen to those monitors. So yes, you can see everything in a single dashboard, as well as you can group them and set different views for different recipients. With that, we will wrap up this webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, to Laura and I, and we will definitely be sending you a follow-up email with the webinar recording as well as the PowerPoint of the slides. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and thank you so much, Laura, again, for talking to us today.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.